Brazil's call-up list came out, and I have to really start analyzing what went on. And of course, I had to just put it straightforward here so I can look at it and kind of give you my take in terms of what Brazil have. Alisson, Bento Ederson, no surprise there. Alisson coming off of one of the best performances, not my words, of his career the other day in that victory for Liverpool against PSG. So most likely he'll be the starter. Ederson has been struggling a little bit, but is there somebody else that's going to step up? Well, maybe you can start saying that Bento could take him over as a second, but that's kind of a bit of a stretch. Now, here's where you start looking at some of the deficiencies of Brazil and a problem that maybe not many have been talking about, or maybe have been talking about, but maybe in not the way I'm going to talk about it, which I don't know if it makes sense or not, but we'll go with it. Danilo, Gabriel Magallanes, Guillermo Arana, Leo Ortiz, Marquinhos, Murillo, Vanderson, and Wesley. Decent in terms of central defenders, decent in terms of what's going on there, decent, good, maybe pretty good to very good, depending on who you talk about. But Brazil's biggest problem is not the midfield. I mean, I mentioned it a lot during Copa America, the lack of dynamic that Brazil's midfield has, the way that they just knock the ball sideways. Very few players are able to create. Yeah, I mentioned all that. But you know why they didn't have that? Because of the fullbacks that they have or don't have anymore. Now, am I saying that that Brazil has to have Cafu every time? Right back? No. You don't even have Jan Couto at this point, which tells you everything you need to know. You have Danilo on the right, which basically you end up saying, wait, hold on, Danilo. Danilo's still with the national team. Yeah, Danilo's with Flamengo, but it seems like he should have been gone a long time ago. That didn't work, hasn't worked, and at this point might never work. And that I think is the biggest problem that you have coming up with some very key matches, especially the Argentina match ends up being very, very important. The match against Colombia also as well. So what do? Well, there aren't many options. And I have to mention, Shivam, shout out to you in terms of what you were mentioning when we're having a conversation about this. There is nothing in terms of fullbacks for right or left. Guillermo Arana is as good as it gets right now at left back, and that tells you everything you need to know. And not only that it's not a very deep position, or deep positions if you include right back. That ends up being a huge problem for the Verde Amarela when it comes to that. So let me not just... Let me add one more thing before I do continue with that. In terms of Brazil, there is no dynamic, and Brazil needs a lot of width. The width was being offered a lot by the fullbacks, whether it was transporting the ball, moving into the middle, helping create numerical superiority in certain sectors, helping in triangulations and being able to not just only advance the ball, but if it did get stuck, they were an outlet to create other things. And of course, the most obvious one there in that final third or final quarter of the pitch, being able to deliver that ball, distribute, and become yet another option out wide. That's where Brazil are really lacking. Andre, Bruno Guimaraes, Gerson, of course, the man from Flamengo, Joelinton, Mateus Acuna, Neymar, he returns. Everyone knew that Neymar was coming back in March. The reason why he didn't return in November was because, well, basically, he was still in the final phase of recovery / not match fit. So might as well give him a few more months. He sure as hell shown that he can do it. He can do it right now. He's been doing it very well with Santos ever since he's returned. And why not give him a chance? Which is basically what everyone was saying. But you knew the reality was another one. Since he was not healthy, why risk him and then have him out for another extended period of time? He's been able to withstand the rigors of the tail end of the Paulistao. And I say it because of the contact, because of the physicality, but also because of the pitches that he's a lot of the pitches that he's playing on. They're absolutely atrocious. He is what Brazil need in terms of having a different player in the midfield, creating more, being willing to associate more, being a bit more daring, adding a little bit more flavor to Brazil, which seemed kind of like chicken, just boiled chicken at this point. Brazil, when it came to attacking, it just they had nothing, or they didn't give you that gusto in terms of how they play, how you were accustomed to seeing Brazil play. You saw a bunch of guys with a yellow T-shirt on, and that's what Brazil ended up devolving into. Esteban, an interesting project. Notice Endrick is not on the list anymore. Endrick hasn't played that much for Real Madrid. Endrick hasn't had continuity, and that ends up being an interesting absence. But you look up top, there's really not one thing that you can say bad about. Esteban, who's been tearing it up with Palmeiras, João Pedro, Rafinha, arguably one of the top 3 players in La Liga right now. Rodrigo for Real Madrid, Savinho over at City, who's done what he's could within that system. And I'm not saying it in a despect. I'm not saying in an insulting manner. City have struggled, but Savinho has done whatever he was capable of doing with what he's had, and obviously Vinicius Junior, the rap in terms of the national team call up for Brazil for their matches against Colombia and Argentina. 2 huge matches for them. 2 huge matches for their respective opponents, as well as now things get interesting in World Cup qualifying in South America, as now everyone jockeys for position. Everyone's trying to see if they can maintain themselves within the seeding of FIFA in order for them to be a top seed or a pot 1 member. And there will be lots to talk about in terms of what this international date will have with what goes on in the matches. Of course, Argentina, Uruguay in the first round is going to be the marquee encounter. Argentina, Brazil. Of course, Uruguay, Argentina will be playing in Uruguay. Argentina and Brazil will be playing in La Plata. If I'm not mistaken, we shall see officially. That hasn't been officially mentioned. But La Plata, obviously being the new home of the Argentine national team, well, we'll talk about the reasons in terms of that. Because what do you mean La Plata? Don't they play at the Monumental? Well, there's political ramifications outside of that. So to conclude, not much in terms of Brazil. Yeah, there is a number 9 missing for Brazil. But then again, you could have called Rodrigo Muniz. You might have been able to call Gabigol, but I don't think Gabigol is going to return to the national team. Pedro is still recovering from injury. He's still recovering from a torn ACL. He'll be back in April. So outside of those 3, you start looking at players, and maybe Esteban could play as a number 9 if you need him to. João Pedro, you might use him there as well. But the thing is, you're going to see a bit of a formation change. Why? Because where do you put Neymar? Are you going to take Vinicius Junior out and put Neymar? Are you going to take Rodrigo out to put Neymar in? You do have a constellation of players that are just absolutely incredible. And the most intriguing one will be where you put Rafinha. Do you take Rodrigo out? Do you take Vinicius Junior out? I would probably say Rodrigo. Not that Rodrigo's playing bad, but you might have to have all 4 players. You might have to have Rafinha, Vinicius Junior playing out, and maybe Rodrigo playing out of position. It'll be interesting to see. I'm just throwing things out there right now. I don't know what Dorival Junior is going to have in mind, but you do find yourself very stacked in terms of that, so much so that you end up leaving Endrick out, which is understandable. I'm not saying that, Vinicius Junior should be, or excuse me, Dorival Junior should be criticized for that. We'll see how that. But it will be most interesting is the dynamic between Neymar and Dorival Junior. I think that's all said and done. The past that they've had between one another and their little tiffs that they've had, I guess, for lack of a better term. Guys, let me know what you think. What do you think about who was left out that should have been on? Who is on that should have been left out? So on and so forth. Will be interesting to hear from all of you. Make sure you follow me. Hey, we're trying to get this to 1,000. We're trying to get this as close to we can to make it kind of a gig where I can give you all types of content as much as I can, as much as I want, and as much as, of course, you want as well. Talk to you soon. Ciao.